The following production is part of the Play Some Video Games podcast network.
Hello, everyone. School is in session. Put away your lunches, find your seats. The bell has rung, and that means class is in session, and you are about to get schooled. It is I, your host, Kevin, and of course, with me each and every episode, my co-host, the lovely Caroline. How are we doing tonight?
Hey, doing good. We are on target with the monthly thing.
Yeah, we did good this time. We did good.
Especially since it was just like right after the holidays. We're here.
New Year's resolution: be better with our shows.
Yeah,
get them out on time. I can't promise they're going to be any better, but we'll get them out on time.
Oh no, trust me. With what I've got next week or next month, it's going to be bomb.com.
Teasing the end of the episode. But if you're not familiar with Arcadia Academia, basically the show is broken down into 3 periods. We have history, the making of, science, the mechanics of, and a free period where you might learn some fun facts. We talk about our personal experiences with the game and where it stands today. So we are a retro rewind, if you will, of classic gaming's little cult classics or just games that have an interesting history that you might not know about. So with that being said, let's dive right into the show. Let's get right into history, the making of. But before we talk about the making of, Caroline, why don't you tell us about the game we'll be talking about today?
All right, this was Kevin's pick from last month. This is Katamari Damacy, a super ridiculous Japanese game that is, luckily, it came to the United States and the West and has graced us with its presence. It is a third-person puzzle action video game developed and published by Namco, originally for the PlayStation 2. Like I said, it was originally released in Japan and then later in North America in 2004 after 2002 or 3 is when it originally came out in Japan. The game actually came about from a school project from the Namco Digital Hollywood Game Laboratory, and it was developed for less than $1 million. And in designing the game, the development team aimed to make 3 points, which were novelty, ease into understanding, and enjoyment.
Now, the primary story in Katamari Damacy deals with the aftermath of the planet-sized king of all cosmos, basically their version of God, went on a binge-drinking spree that wiped out all of the stars and other celestial bodies from the sky.
Best dad ever.
Yeah, I know, right? So, like any great dad, the king, who appears to be chronically dissatisfied with his 5-centimeter tall son's small size, charges the prince with the mission to go to Earth with the Katamari, a magical ball that allows anything smaller than it to stick to it, and then make itself grow in the thing and collect enough material for him to recreate the stars and constellations and basically fix his mess for him. The prince, obviously, in the end is successful, spoilers, and the sky is returned to normal.
Yeah, because we make stars out of, starting with lollipops and lipstick, and then later humans and sumo wrestlers and buildings.
Are you implying that sumo wrestlers are not humans?
They are a lot harder to knock down than the regular humans.
Fair enough.
They take a long time to knock down. They have more mass, so it's all based on mass, size and mass and stuff. So there's a side story in this game too. It's not just about the prince collecting all of the or rolling up everything on his Katamari and making constellations and stars in the sky again. The side story follows a Japanese family called the Hoshino family while the prince is doing all these Katamaris and stuff in each level. Their father is an astronaut, and he's unable to go to the moon after the moon is obviously wiped out by the king and his drunken stupor. And the daughter, Michiru, senses the prince's work. She goes, I said that, just very deadpan Japanese.
Oh, yeah.
She could feel each constellation returning to the sky. So, Capricorn, Cancer. Yeah, she senses all of that stuff. So ultimately, the family, along with their house and the town, are sadly rolled up in the Katamari that is used to remake the moon. But it's kind of ironic, you know?
It is. I'm also going to clip out that sound clip of you just going, Cancer, because out of context, that's fantastic.
Oh, no.
Creator of Katamari Damacy, Kita Takahashi, had studied art and entered in the Mushihino Art University to study sculpting in 1995. During his studies, he came to a philosophy that his art needed to combine practical elements along with a bit of whimsy and humor. One of his more quote-unquote famous pieces he did was an actual planter, like a pot. You put a plant in that was shaped like a goat, and the excess water would actually drain through the goat's udders. So it was a little bit like humor implied with the actual art itself. After graduation, though, he no longer had the desire to pursue sculpting as a full-time career and saw the potential to become involved in video games as a means to continue his art interest in a larger medium because, mid to end 90s, that was a big golden era of video games. So there's a lot going on there. So he saw the opportunity, especially in Japan. So he joined Namco as an artist around 1999. He worked on a number of smaller projects for the publisher. One was called Action Drive, which was heavily inspired by Crazy Taxi, but had more of a spy-based elements on top of the driving gameplay. So it was like Spy Hunter meets Crazy Taxi kind of thing.
Right.
Takahashi came up with the ideas and characters that would be central to Katamari Damacy, the king, the queen, and the prince. The idea initially was to have the queen be kidnapped by agents on Earth, and the lazy king sends the prince to rescue her. To do this, the player would use diminutive prince's head, shaped like a hammer, to stun humans. So basically, if you see the picture of the prince, he's got like this round tube head thing. So the point would be you run around and smack people with your head. And then the prince would drive the humans around by putting a steering wheel on the back of their head. So basically almost like a parasitic type relationship there.
Insane.
Takahashi felt this would lead to interesting and creative gameplay. No duh. Allowing the player to create havoc as the prince followed the misguided suggestions from the king. But the project leader rejected that idea. Action Drive was eventually canceled as well.
Oh well. He made it in the end. So we all know that Katamari Damacy obviously came into fruition. He's in the art department, not in the game design department, right? So there's no real easy way for him to get this idea to the higher ups at Namco. Ozaki, who was a former employer of Takahashi, suggested an idea to, hey, do this through the Digital Hollywood Game Laboratory. At the time, Namco had been following in the model that Konami used in 97, which was establishing an entertainment school to help educate new game developers, which were eventually they would be hired into Konami. And several of the experimental ideas founded by the school during this time became products within the Konami Games and Music division, which was later called Bemani, those were pretty highly successful, which include games like Beatmania, Guitar Freaks, and what we know as DDR. Namco also hoped that the Digital Hollywood Game Laboratory would follow a similar path to what Konami did. At the same time, Masaya Nakamura was a principal of the school, and he oversaw one senior thesis where the students were being trained on 3D modeling towards producing a prototype that could be potentially made into a full game down the road. And Ozaki suggested to Takahashi that he could have students of this class create 3D objects that would be needed to populate the world in Katamari Damacy, or what he envisioned as Katamari.
Absolutely. So he took his advice and joined the project to help produce the prototype for this game. Alongside 10 students from the Digital Hollywood program, he'd been able to gain some visual design artists from Namco to help with the prototype, but had a little bit difficulty getting any game developer engineers due to the low priority of the school as far as Namco was concerned. He was fortunate enough, though, to find that some of the engineers from Namco's arcade game division were going to be laid off, and he was able to convince 3 of them to join his team to retain their jobs within Namco.
Then I guess the actual work on Katamari Damacy actually began in late 2001. Namco assigned Now Production, which was an Osaka company, to bring the game to the PlayStation 2. Takahashi was initially concerned that having to work with another studio in a different location, but he found out that Namco and Now production teams worked pretty well together. And the full team consisted of about 20 members between two companies. They had allocated a budget of about 100 million yen, which was roughly about, at the time, 650,000 to 800,000 US dollars, which was at the time of the production. That's about a tenth of the cost of the budget allocated for Ridge Racer and Soul Calibur, which Namco also produced. Katamari itself took about a full year and a half to develop, with 8 months of it prototyping for the digital Hollywood version.
So Takahashi had said the team was aiming for the 4 key points you mentioned earlier. So novelty, ease of understanding, enjoyment, and humor. At one point, though,
I thought
Namco,
it was 3 at first.
Yeah, that's true. Typo.
We added
sorry.
4 in there.
My bad. Humor was the 4th. At one point during development, though, Namco started getting a lot more involved in it. They saw the potential there and kind of started backing him a little bit more, obviously, when the addition of the additional studio to help there. So they started pointing out things they wanted, like power-ups and different things. And they basically he ignored them, which I thought was pretty ballsy for somebody who was given an opportunity from the art department to design a game to then, basically proactively ignored advice from Namco to increase the complexity of the game. They wanted more involved power-ups, objectives. Initially, the game actually did not have a timer, which I know in some levels there isn't a timer, but the whole game initially didn't have a timer. And that's one thing he actually did take from them, is that, hey, the game's enjoyment was taken away from a little bit if you didn't have some sort of end goal or time frame to stop you from just continually rolling your Katamari.
Mm-hmm. Hey, we'll talk about this in a bit, but I don't like being timed on stuff. That also kind of goes, into the future. They're like, well, we got to make more Katamari games, and he felt pressured to continue doing it and such. So I think he only worked on the sequel, and then after that, Namco decided to keep going with it on their own, and they've taken his original ideas and kind of made it their own.
Yeah, the sequel he only got involved with was because Namco made it clear that they were going to do it with or without him. Yeah. And he didn't want that to happen, so he at least worked on the sequel, and then after that kind of stepped back and said no more.
Yep. Now they've kind of just, they've done what he didn't want to do in a few of it. But I mean, that's why I haven't really played a lot of the other ones, not to mention I just don't own the console, but yeah, there's that. So we've discussed pretty much the history of everything. So our history class is done. Now we're going into our science period. Let's talk about gameplay and mechanics and stuff. So, really the whole gist of this game is you're controlling the prince. The prince rolls the little sticky Katamari around, starting in a very small area. Like you're originally starting underneath tables around mice and stuff. And then as the Katamari grows bigger, Prince is still the same size, but you're able to go around larger things and collect bigger things like houses and buildings and cities and stuff in order to meet a centimeter or meter size parameter that the king's like, you've got to have it at least 5 centimeters. Or that's actually very small, but you know what I mean. Yeah. I'm gonna leave you on Earth, and I can hang around for like maybe 5 minutes, and then if you're not done by then I'm just gonna leave you here. You're a failure. So best dad ever, right? Best dad ever. Mm-hmm. The player uses 2 analog sticks on it was the DualShock controller for the PlayStation 2. It's similar. We'll talk about this in a minute. Two joysticks. So you're just controlling the way that the Katamari rolls, and then also the moving forward and around, and then the other one's kind of controlling the camera. It's almost I liken it to an RC car.
Yeah, definitely.
If you've had an RC car and you've had both of those analog sticks moving around, you're pretty good on controlling this thing. Other controls can be triggered by the person playing the game to get a quick burst of speed, to flip them on the other side of the Katamari, and just make sure that you need to do a hands-on experience in order to understand how it works. I was glad that when I replayed this, that there was the tutorial in the beginning, because I was like, oh my gosh, I would not have remembered any of this stuff. I just figured you could go. But yep.
So you mentioned the rolling around the Katamari. You start off really small and move things up. So objects that are smaller than the Katamari will stick to them when the player comes into contact with them. While greater objects can be hurdles, colliding at a high speed will cause objects to actually bounce off your Katamari and you lose size. So you not only can't pick it up, you lose stuff, which will obviously slow your progress. The game uses weight, size, and surface area to determine if an object will stick to the Katamari. This allows slender objects such as pencil that are longer than the Katamari's wide to be picked up. But then it also affects how the Katamari then rolls, because if you imagine something like a pencil being stiff up against the ball, as you roll it, it's going to spike and make the ball kind of roll very funny, which the game does very accurately. The physics are spot on for this, and that's a big part of it. Animals such as cats will chase the Katamari, knocking things away from it. If you roll into a car as a car is driving, it will knock stuff off of you and send you flying as well. So objects, as they stick to the Katamari will grow. Eventually, objects that were once hurdles to then be picked up. So those same cats and mice and cars can be picked up eventually if you get big enough. You might start the game by picking up thumbtacks and ants, and then work your way to the point you're picking up buildings, mountains, clouds, etc. Yep.
My favorite is running into a mousetrap, and the mousetrap just shoots you off to the other side of the... Great inhibitor of progress. Gotta love it. Not. All right, so typical missions that the King of All Cosmos gives you is making stars. It's where you need to make the Katamari to a specific size within a given time frame. So as I was talking before, like maybe it's a meter and you've got 10 minutes to do it. Other missions have more specific collecting rules, such as all of the, they're just constellations. So for making, Cancer, you've got the crabs. So you're collecting as many crabs as possible. Or Ursa Major is collecting the largest bear. Man, that one's annoying. Yep. It's so annoying because there's like these little bear statues that technically count as a bear, but they're super tiny. And if you accidentally roll into the first bear you see,
match over.
Anyway, the player can attempt score attack mode for any level, where you try to basically make the largest Katamari possible in the time allotted. Certain levels also unlock Eternal mode, which is creating an exceptionally large Katamari with no time limit. That's my favorite.
Those are fun.
Talk about that in a bit.
Those are fun. Each level also features 2 secret items that can be found. The first one is a royal present that contains an object that the prince can wear, so you can kind of customize them. Most gifts are non-functional, but one includes a camera that can be used to take in-game screenshots. So it's funny the way it's presented too. Is the king will normally tell you, hey, I left a gift for you, but I dropped it somewhere on Earth, so why don't you just go get it while you're down there? So once again, Dad of the Year. The other secret item in each level is a cousin of the prince. I don't know if you consider that a duke, an earl. I don't know how the royal family works, but once it's rolled up in the main gameplay, it can be used as a character in the various multiplayer modes. However, cousins can only be found and rolled up after the game is beaten. The game also tracks which objects the player has collected at any time, allowing you to review all the various objects within the game. So it kind of keeps a
running tab,
like a Pokedex version of the weird items. You can go back and view every single thing you can pick up, which are all based on real products in Japan. Some are even brand name products. They just don't have the label on it, but they're specifically designed to be this specific item in Japan.
Yeah, a lot of them are crazy too. Mahjong pieces, just it's a very cultural thing. Everything is pretty much just Japanese. Anyway, there's also a 2-player mode, which a player can choose to play as either the prince or one of his cousins, as we mentioned. The screen split vertically, so player 1's on the left, player 2's on the right, and the players compete simultaneously in the same area to collect the most objects within 3 minutes of time. The playing field's replenished with new objects periodically. They can ram into each other. They can knock items off of the other person's Katamari, and whoever leads by, if it leads by a fair amount, then you can actually roll up the other Katamari into your own Katamari.
Yeah. I never really played the 2-player mode that much.
We didn't either when I played it with friends. We just kind of swapped around on Eternal mode over and over again. It's just like, okay, go at it, try and get everything on the map.
It's more fun. It's a peaceful game. The last thing you want to do is compete with each other. So.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps up the science, the mechanics of the game. You should have a good idea of what this game is if you're not familiar with it already. So let's get into the free period. Let's talk about some fun facts and personal experiences. My favorite part of the show, to be honest. First fun fact for you. The King of All Cosmos, his face was actually modeled after legendary lead singer of Queen, Freddie Mercury. And his body was modeled after a famous Japanese ballet dancer, Tetsuyaka Kumakawa.
Tetsuya
sure.
Kamikawa.
Sure.
Yeah, I knew about the first one. I did not know about the ballet dancer, but it makes complete sense.
It explains his outfit. Hands down, it looks like something similar to. I looked up the ballet dancer afterwards to see, and I'm like, wow, yeah, that looks like what the King of Cosmos wears is one of those outfits. And despite the original game releasing in 2004, the gameplay style wasn't patented until 2009, which left them wide open for copycats. However, none really emerged. I don't know if it's because it's more of a cult classic game, but just the whole physics and how everything worked.
Yeah.
I mean, it
I think
really
the physics were really difficult to duplicate.
Right. That's the thing, is like, it was such an original, different idea, and the physics behind it really hadn't been done in any game prior. So you'd think he'd want to trap it down, but Takahashi's personal belief on games that should be fun, you should enjoy them. He didn't care much for saying, oh, I need to lock down and I need to own this, and this is what he just wanted people to enjoy and have fun. So he didn't really do it until Namco was kind of like, we're doing it, so put your name on it if you want credit for it. So that's kind of how it worked. But yeah, he wasn't concerned with it. He just wanted to make a great game for all to enjoy.
What a cool guy. All right, so there was a single level demonstration of the final version of Katamari, which was exhibited at the 2003 Tokyo Game Show, or we know it as TGS. The demo was critically praised by the press. Sony expressed strong interest in pushing the game's release forward based on the game show's response. They offered to handle the game's promotion in exchange. Sony advertised the game on numerous billboards and posters across Japan, and they created an infamous television ad of a businessman waiting for an appointment, rolling up office furniture and staff. And I remember, I don't believe this one ever came to the West, but I do remember seeing it at some point on YouTube or something.
Yep. It's a great ad. Yep. The game was released, as we mentioned, in Japan on March 18, 2004, priced at about 4,000 yen, which is about 2/3 of the cost of most major titles at the time. Namco had estimated the game would sell over 500,000 units in Japan during its first year. While the game did not make that metric, it stayed one of the top 10 games sold in Japan through its first 9 weeks on the market, with more than 100,000 units sold during that period, which was considered impressive for a new intellectual property, so not a sequel, not any spinoff. The public reaction to the game was so positive enough that Namco ordered a sequel by December of 2004. So the game didn't even make it out a year before they said, we're greenlighting a sequel, let's go.
Yep. As of that time, though, they had not considered any sort of Western release for the game, but they showed it at the United States Experimental Gameplay Workshop during the March 2004 Game Developers Conference, and their reaction was, they described it as electric, but they were disappointed that there were no plans for a Western release. And then the media attention of the game from the workshop, called Namco's Snowball Simulator, that's what they called it, led to more pressure on Namco for a Western release. So Takahashi was invited to come to present the game at E3 in 2004. And players wanting the game to release in the West also actually wrote to Namco for them to release it over in the United States. So by July 2004, Namco officially announced that the game was going to be released in the United States in September of 2004. It was never released in Europe on the PS2, but its subsequent sequels ended up being released in Europe.
And speaking of subsequent sequels, a high-definition remaster of the game titled Katamari Damacy Reroll was released on the Nintendo Switch eShop and Microsoft Windows 7 store on December of last year. The game includes support for the Switch's gyro controls in addition to its traditional control scheme, and I know that's how both of us went and revisited this game, although I do still have my downloaded version on my PS3, which still works. So I could have played it there as well, but I chose to re-experience it on the Switch.
Yeah. I think gyro controls are terrifying in most things. Like, I don't even use them for Splatoon, so I can't even imagine me using them for this kind of thing.
I don't either.
Well, it's good that Europe finally got to experience this, not by porting an American or Japanese version of the game onto a there's no region locking on PlayStation 2, so I guess they would be okay. But
the new one. The old ones did.
Oh, did they? I never owned a PS2, so I have no idea. I just thought that it was a Nintendo thing. Anyway, fun facts.
Yeah, that wraps up the fun facts. So let's talk about our original encounters of this game and our memories and our thoughts overall. So I'll go first because I remember vividly. So this is one of my favorite games, like top 10 of all time. I'd probably put this up in there for me. I was working at Toys R Us at the time that this game actually released in the US. And prior to this, I knew nothing about it. I hadn't seen the E3 coverage of it before. I hadn't seen the commercials because obviously they were all in Japan. The internet was still in its infancy as far as video game coverage online. I mean, we had GameSpot, but that was about it. So this game totally eluded me as far as news coverage. So it came out, and I remember seeing it on the shelf because it released at $19.99. So number one, like it was a new game that was straight to the budget area in Toys R Us. Like you had all the games, and then anything $19.99 or less had its own section.
Sure.
So we put it on, I saw the cover, and I was like, this cover looks crazy weird. So me and my buddy, we flipped it over at the back of the case, gave you the synopsis of the story. I'm like, this is nuts. So that night I went and looked it up at home and saw the opening video for this game. So if you've ever played this game, that opening video, the opening theme song, I was like, sold, buying it the next day, because I'm like, all I needed to see was that. I didn't need to see gameplay. I saw nothing. I just saw the opening video. I'm like, I need to see what this game is. And I absolutely love it. It's just such a simplistic, fun game with an amazing soundtrack. One of the top soundtracks in all of gaming for me. Easily. It gets stuck in my head. I'll walk around the house and sing it. My wife and kids sing it. Like, we all know it. So it's great. And yeah, I bought as many of the sequels as I could. There were some that were available only on Xbox, some that were available only, on like iOS. So I wasn't able to play every iteration of Katamari, but I did play most of them whenever I could. So it's something that stuck with me for a long time, and I do enjoy it. The new Switch version, it's nice. The controls still feel old to me a little bit, which isn't a problem. They kept it the same game, but the graphics and touch-ups there, as far as that looks, it looks better and it runs better. I don't get the lag I used to get on PS2.
Right.
Or in my PS3 download copy, digital copy, where it's like the backwards compatibility. So it wasn't really touched up for PS3. It's still the PS2 game. You're just playing it on an emulator. Right. So yeah, this was definitely a nice touch-up version. So anybody interested, it's cheap on Switch. Is what, $30? $40?
Yeah, it's $29.99. So yeah, you can buy it physically, but I don't think the physical copies are available anymore, dudes.
It was a GameStop only.
In-store only. You can't even buy this thing on Switch physically through GameStop's website. You had to get it in store. I was lucky that I was able to find one through my in-laws. My in-laws GameStop. So, but yeah, it got a great facelift. I always thought of the game as colorful and cheery, but looking at a comparison, it's extremely lightened up, brightened up. They didn't really do much of a polygon resolution addition to it. It's still very much the same models and such from the original. It's just everything kind of got a brighter facelift and crisper.
Yeah, there was a lot of pastels in the colors initially, and now it's more bright colors. Where the original game was like pastel everything.
Right. I watched it side by side, and it was kind of like, wow, how do we play it like that?
Right.
But my experience with it, gosh, it'll make you feel old. When this game was announced and came out, I was very early high school, freshman in high school, I believe. When it came out, I was a freshman in high school. So I remember friends that had PlayStation 2s. I never played it until I went over to, I would go over to their house and they would have it. Now they had everything unlocked. They'd beaten the game completely. They had Eternal Mode unlocked. And all we really did was play Eternal Mode over and over and over again, to the point that, there was no time limit. It was just, who can roll it up and get all of the stuff, just completely clear the board. That was the way that I enjoyed playing it. And so getting it for the Switch this time around, I originally was like, man, this is hard to control. I never grew up with RC cars, so I'm not used to that 2 joystick thing at the same time. So that took some getting used to. It was a learning curve trying to remember how it worked. But the time limit stuff really kills me. It's not that I dislike it, but I'm just a very anxious person, and I can't stand being timed in video games.
And that last minute where the clock like,
yes, that's terrible. It's terrible. That's a terrible noise, by the way. But it's just, I don't like feeling pressured. So the fact that they added that time limit thing in there when he originally didn't have it, I was like, what are you guys doing? Why? Just let me make my star, that my star is going to be dinky and stupid because you're pressuring me. Aside from feeling pressured and just not liking time limits and stuff in the game, it's still a great game. It is very kind of just cathartic to just screw all this stuff. I'm getting as much as I can, stick it all up. It's mine.
Mm-hmm.
Throw it into space as garbage.
It's therapy. It's just soothing.
It really is. It really is.
I mean, you're a collector, so collecting everything is literally like what you want to do. So
no. So I've been playing it on stream. I played it on stream for a little bit, but then I realized as I was having more and more trouble, I was like, this is probably not the best game for me to stream. It's probably just something that I need to lie on the couch and play.
Mm-hmm.
So I can, if I'm not happy with how I did it, I can restart the level and do it all over again from there. But I just feel more pressure while I'm on stream than I'm already pressured to do. So I haven't been playing it on stream, but it's still great. I'm glad I ended up getting a physical copy of it. It's something I'm glad I finally actually owned. I never owned it for PlayStation 2. I just played it over at a friend's house. But I've never played any of the sequels. This game is the original OG and it's classic. And I don't think that anything in the sequel department would come close. That's just me.
Yeah, a lot of the sequels were just more of the same, a little less imaginative as far as like the level designs. Wasn't
We Love Katamari? That was like the bringing back levels of
they were like remastered with twists of the ones, the 2 or 3 games that came out prior to it. So that was the PS3 one. There was We Love Katamari, Beautiful Katamari,
is the other
Touch My Katamari. There was like all different ones. But yeah, that We Love Katamari was a remaster, revisioning of like certain levels and stages there too. So it was just kind of like more of the same, but it didn't have quite the same soundtrack, the same experience as the first one did. And kind of almost proved Takahashi right in saying like, hey, I don't want to make sequels for this. He wanted it to be a one and done thing because it got the point across. But this
soundtrack, guys, I mean, it's ungodly. It is really good. Playing this on stream and I have my headphones in. There's stereo surround for these. I mean, I'm just sitting here grooving while I'm moving. Super nice.
It is. And I'm going to put a whole bunch. I think I'm going to put songs in between each of the classes.
Yeah.
In this episode to kind of give people a little taste of what we're talking about, so they don't have to go find it on their own. But it's a lot of fun, and that was part of the experience too. And his design was having music in there. In the initial design of the game, it was initially thought that he was going to have the music interact with what the prince was doing in each stage. It was almost like an interactive song. So like as you picked up things, it might be a beat that goes along with the music.
Sure.
That was eventually scrapped just because the game was already complicated enough with its physics, so they didn't want to try and mess with that. Right. But the initial theme song came from his hobby of walking around and humming. And people used to make fun of him for doing it. So he actually recorded part of that title track. That was him actually humming, and then they put it to music after that. But that was just him doing what he does because he's a little kooky, but it's all good. So before we wrap up, though, your thoughts. So we know he didn't want more sequels, but now that this remaster, this reroll has been out on the Switch, do you now want to experience more Katamari coming down the line, with or without him, just any more of this traditional style gameplay, not these weird takes we've had on mobile and stuff like that?
I think I could deal with more levels. I'm not sure how the story works. Like, why are you making the Katamaris in the other one? Or did the stars fall out of the sky again? Or the constellations messed up?
Yep.
I feel like this was just a one and done narrative type thing that I definitely appreciate why he wanted to keep this kind of a one-hit wonder. I don't know. I like the game a lot. And I think playing it over and over again, even in the levels that you get, it's got plenty of replayability. Like I said, we would play on Eternal mode over and over and over again. It's just nice and cathartic to roll everything up. I can't explain it. You just have to play it for yourself. Donnie doesn't get it. He says he doesn't like it and he doesn't get it, but that's Donnie,
Donnie doesn't like things. Neither do I, but I like this one. And for those of you who have a significant other who's maybe not a gamer or just games occasionally, hey, this is a great one to possibly pique their interest in. This is a lot of fun, very easy to control, something that you can go back and forth and hand over that controller and have some fun with, I think, in my opinion. So hopefully we see more. I'd like to see more personally. As long as if he's involved, even better. But if not, I mean, the formula is there. I think kind of anybody can pick it up. And as far as the story, I mean, you have a good point that the story's kind of done, but story doesn't really ever make sense anyway with Katamari, so it doesn't bother me that much. But
it's a fever dream. It just
it totally is.
It's insane.
100%. So that, I think, wraps up this episode of Arcadia Academia. But before we dismiss you guys, we have a little bit of a homework assignment. So as always, we like to surprise the other co-host with what the pick is for next month. So Caroline, what is your pick for February?
It's near and dear to both of our hearts. So go ahead and figure out which one it is. It's just a small bit earlier than this game. You know what it is.
Animal Crossing.
Yes! OG Animal Crossing! Let's do it. Yeah, Kevin and I both love Animal Crossing. So Dobotsu no Mori, which is technically Animal Forest, but it was originally released for the N64 in Japan and ported over to the GameCube in America and released as Animal Crossing. It was so good that they wanted all of the additions that they made for the English release in the US and in Europe, and they made it Animal Forest E+ for the GameCube. So we will be talking about that. Stay tuned. Look forward to that. We'll be talking about the original game, not any of the sequels and stuff. But
we'll save those for later.
Yeah, well,
nice.
Much later. They're not that old yet.
No, not at all. Before we go, Caro, where can people find you and link up with what you're doing?
People can find me at the Nintendo on Twitter, on Twitch, and pretty much on YouTube. I have a Facebook and an Instagram too, but I get tickled to go over there every so often, but it's not a daily thing like the other ones. You can also find me on the Nintendo Shack. We record every Thursday. We are now going live every Saturday, Shack Saturdays or Saturday Morning Shack. So we can talk Nintendo every week. And that's about it.
Go. You can find me at PSVG Kevin on Twitter, and you can find all my links to all my stuff there. Reminder, because this didn't exist when we did our last episode, Arcadia Academia is available on its own podcast feed.
I forgot about that.
So if you want to just subscribe to Arcadia Academia, you can do so in all of the places: Apple, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, everything. We're there. We're just there. So Arcadia Academia, subscribe. Share with a friend. If you have somebody that likes retro games but isn't into modern gaming, maybe this is a show for them. So please, we appreciate you spreading the word. And thank you so much to our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. And if you'd like to support the entire PSVG podcast network, head over to patreon.com/PSVG to find out more from there. So that's it, everyone. Class is out. You're dismissed, and you have officially been schooled. It's my
This has been a PSVG production. Any music, sound effects, or the like is owned by their respective copyright holders. No infringement is intended. The views expressed in this production are those of the individual contributor and may not necessarily reflect PSVG. This production may not be repurposed, reused, or redistributed without the express written consent of PSVG. PSVG is powered by patrons at patreon.com/PSVG. Become a patron to get special perks, including access to exclusive content.